My goal in this overview on the lesson Saul's disobedience in 1 Samuel 13 is to show the key verse, the theme, and the overall structure that I would use if I were teaching it. Let's get started. The key verse to this whole section is summarized in the two phrases, "To obey is better than sacrifice," and "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king." It highlights the underlying theme that unfolds in the story details all the way through from chapters 13 through 15. Rather than obeying God from his heart, Saul was driven by trying to please the people and was giving superficial acknowledgement to God, and that was rebellion. The story unfolds with a prologue, 3 main sections, and an epilogue. In the prologue, Saul is anointed king by Samuel. Then in the story details, section 1 is what Saul saw. He sees Philistines, thousands of them, with chariots and thousands of horsemen gathered together for war against him. Secondly, he sees his army of only about 3,000 running away and hiding wherever they can find a place. And the third thing he sees is that Samuel, who is supposed to get God's blessing over the whole thing and by offering the sacrifice, is late. Section 2 is what Saul did. He offers the sacrifice that only Samuel is supposed to offer. He reasons that he needs God's blessing in order to move forward, but in his mind, God is running late. Notice, he is trying to be the king that leads the people into battle. Appearance is very important to Saul. Section 3 is what Saul said. Samuel arrives just as the sacrifice has been offered and asks Saul, "What have you done?" Notice he is pinpointing what Saul actually did, and notice the subject of Saul's answer in 1 Samuel 13, 11 and 12. "Because I saw the people were scattering." Notice the people. "And you didn't come within the appointed days." Notice you. "And the Philistines were assembling at Michmash." Notice the Philistines. And then finally, "So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." Saul was reporting on what everyone else did and was justifying his disobedience. Then in the epilogue, we find that the kingdom is taken from Saul because of his disobedience. God is seeking out a man after his own heart to lead his people. Here are some useful facts to have as you study the passage. First, Israel was established by God as a theocracy. He was the king. When the Israelites asked for a king in 1 Samuel 8, God was clear that they were rejecting him. However, what he is establishing with King Saul, the very first king, is that the human king is still under his authority and subject to his laws. Second, Saul demonstrates that he was not a man of faith. We see him trusting in his own ability and evaluating the situation that he sees in front of him, not by what God is going to do, but by what he thinks he can do. Remember, the people wanted a king to go out before them and fight their battles. Saul looks the part. He is tall and handsome, but he was under immense pressure to please the people who had demanded him because he is relying on himself. This leads him to live by sight and please people rather than living by faith and obeying God. Third, the very first time Saul met Samuel, when he was privately anointed, the people were waiting for Samuel to offer the sacrifice. And then later in chapter 10, verse 8, Samuel tells Saul, "I will come down to you to offer the burnt offering and sacrifice peace offerings. You shall wait 7 days until I come to you and show you what you should do." Now it's about 2 years later when Saul offers the sacrifice without Samuel. In other words, Saul already had experience, and he knew what he was doing was wrong. Fourth, Saul's army had dwindled from about 3,000 down to 600 over a period of 7 days, and you can feel the ticking clock and Saul's panic as he watches another volunteer slink off into hiding. However, in the not-too-distant past, Gideon had defeated the Midianite horde of 135,000 with only 300 men. And just after this incident, Jonathan says to his armor-bearer, "God is not constrained to save by many or by few. It's another indication that Saul was looking at the situation through the lens of his own ability, or rather, his inability. If he had had faith in God's ability to deliver Israel, he would have been able to obediently wait and not try to force things to happen. Finally, this incident is not a one strike and you are out. In the big picture, God is establishing the whole monarchy that is going to last for hundreds of years. The consequences for the first leader are going to be more significant precisely because he is the first leader. Does it matter if that man looks good but doesn't have a heart of faith? Absolutely it matters. This incident and the one in chapter 15 are a sober warning not to turn away from God and His commands. They show the contrast to David, a man that outwardly wasn't quite as tall and who looked very youthful, but was a man after God's own heart. As you prepare this lesson to teach, take a minute to ask yourself, are you trying to do God's work by your own abilities, based on what you see in front of you, or by faith in what God is going to do through you? Are there people you are trying to please that drive your actions out of fear of failing? And finally, is there a sin that you've been justifying that you just need to confess to God as sin? Many blessings as you teach God's Word.